Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair at the huge round table. The meeting room was so big that his voice would echo if he spoke too loud. Around him sat representatives from 12 different alien species. They had been talking for 3 months now, and Jake was getting tired of it all. The talks were supposed to be about peace, about sharing space fairly between all the different species. But every day, it felt more like the aliens were just telling humans what they could and could not do. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez sat next to Jake. She was the smartest person he knew when it came to understanding alien cultures. But even she looked frustrated. Today, she had been taking notes, but now her pen just sat still in her hand. Across the table, Ambassador Zekdar was talking again. He was tall and looked like a lizard that could walk on 2 legs. Key's skin was green and covered in scales that reflected the light from the ceiling. When he spoke, his voice sounded like gravel being poured into a metal bucket. The humans must understand their position, Zekdar said, pointing one of his clawed fingers at Jake. They are new to space. They are new to our ways. They cannot expect to be treated the same as species who have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Kay kept his face calm, but inside he was angry. Humans had been in space for over a century now. They had built cities on Mars and Europa. They had ships that could travel faster than light. They had fought off pirate attacks and helped other species solve problems that had been bothering them for decades. High Counselor Thash floated above his seat. He looked like he was made of blue light that moved like water. His voice came from everywhere at once when he spoke, like surround sound speakers built into the air itself. Captain Morrison Thash said, "Your species has shown promise, but promise is not the same as proven ability. The Galactic Council has responsibilities. We cannot give important territory to a species that might not be ready for it." Jake looked at the holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a map of local space with different colored zones marking who controlled what areas. The zones humans wanted were marked in red. They were not the best zones. They were not even good zones. They were average zones that humans had asked for because they seemed fair. But even these average zones were too much. According to the aliens, Commander Ryan Blake sat behind Jake. He was head of security for the human delegation. Jake could feel Ryan getting tense. Ryan had been a soldier before he became a diplomat's bodyguard. He did not like the way the aliens were talking to his people. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Jake said, standing up slowly. His voice was quiet but clear. "Humans have been in space for over 100 years. We have 27 colonies that are successful and growing. We have ships that can fight, ships that can explore, and ships that can carry trade goods. We have helped the Nautiloids fix their water recycling problems. We helped the Zephyrians build better communication systems. We even helped your own people fight off the raider attacks in the Outer Rim." Jake walked around to the holographic display. He pointed at the red zones. "These areas we have asked for are not prime real estate, right? They're average systems with average planets. Some of them don't even have planets worth living on. We picked them because they seemed reasonable, because we thought we could ask for something fair and get it." Ambassador Zekdar made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like a snake hissing. "Fair? You think you deserve fair treatment? Your species was still living in caves when mine was building starships. You are barely evolved primates who learned to use tools yesterday. You should be grateful for whatever scraps we choose to give you." The room went very quiet. Even the translator machines seemed to pause for a moment. Dr. Rodriguez put down her pen and looked up at Jake. Her eyes were wide, because she was surprised by what the alien said, but because she could see what was about to happen. Jake turned around slowly to face Zekdar. His voice was still quiet, but now everyone in the room could hear the anger underneath it. Barely evolved primates, Jake repeated. Scraps from your table. High Counselor Theseus' blue light flickered. Perhaps Ambassador Zekdar spoke more harshly than necessary, but his point is valid. Humans are a developing species. You need guidance from your betters. You need to learn your place in the galactic community. It's our place, Jake said. He looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked curious. Some looked annoyed. A few looked worried, like they knew something bad was about to happen. Jake walked back to his chair and started gathering his papers. Dr. Rodriguez, please pack up your notes. Lisa stood up immediately and began putting her things into her briefcase. She had worked with Jake for 5 years. She knew him well enough to recognize when he had made a decision. Captain Morrison, Thesh said, his voice sounding more urgent now. Where are you going? We are in the middle of important negotiations. Jake picked up his briefcase and looked around the room one more time. No, we're not. Negotiations happen between equals. They happen between people who respect each other. What we have been doing here for 3 months is listening to you tell us what we can't have and why we don't deserve it. He started walking toward the door. Lisa followed him, and Commander Blake fell into step behind them both. We came here in good faith, Jake said, not stopping or turning around. We offered to share technology. We offered to help with security problems. We offered to trade fairly and work together. In return, you have made it clear that you see us as children who should be grateful for your attention. Ambassador Zekdar stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. You cannot simply leave. This is not how diplomacy works. Jake stopped at the door and turned around one last time. You're right. This is not how diplomacy works. Diplomacy works when both sides want to find a solution that helps everyone. What you want is for us to accept whatever you decide to give us and say thank you. He looked directly at High Counselor Thesh. When you are ready to treat humanity as equals, when you are ready to negotiate instead of dictate, you know how to contact us. The door slid shut behind them with a soft whisper. Inside the meeting room, 12 alien species sat in stunned silence. In over 300 years of Galactic Council history, no species had ever simply walked out of peace talks. High Counselor Theseus' blue light pulsed faster, showing his agitation. They will be back, he said to the room. Once they realize they cannot survive alone, they will come back and accept our terms. Ambassador Zekdar settled back into his chair, looking satisfied. Exactly. Let them try to manage on their own. They will learn quickly enough that they need us more than we need them. But near the back of the room, Counselor Yeth of the Zephyrians was not so sure. She had worked with human engineers on several projects. She knew how clever they could be when they put their minds to something. She also knew that humans had a reputation for doing surprising things when people underestimated them. As the meeting broke up and the various alien representatives headed back to their ships, none of them realized they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. News of the human walkout spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. On the Vorthan homeworld, General Vexstar received a report while reviewing his military plans. He laughed so hard that his scales rattled. The humans think they can survive without us, he told his staff officers. This will be entertaining to watch. Give them 2 weeks, maybe 3, and they will come crawling back, begging for our help. His officers nodded in agreement. The Vorthan military was the strongest in the galaxy. They had ships, weapons, and experience that the humans could only dream of having. What could a young species like humanity possibly do without the protection and guidance of the Galactic Council? On the crystalline world of Zeph Prime, the Zephyrian leadership was not so confident. Counselor Yeth stood in her chamber, looking at the reports coming in from across their territory. 3 major engineering projects had problems in the last day. All 3 had been managed by human technical specialists. Send word to the human engineers. she told her assistant. Ask them to return to their posts. Offer them better pay if necessary. The response came back within hours. The human engineers thanked the Zephyrians for their offer, but explained they had been recalled to human space for priority assignments. They would not be returning to their old jobs. High Counselor Thesh floated in his private chambers, his blue light flickering with satisfaction. The humans had played right into his hands. Now he could show the galaxy what happened when species tried to challenge the natural order. The Galactic Council had existed for over 1,000 years. It would not be threatened by one small species having a temper tantrum. He sent out an official statement to all council members in neutral worlds. The statement expressed disappointment in humanity's childish behavior and offered to resume negotiations when humans were ready to act like adults. The statement was broadcast on every major news network in the galaxy. Most species read it and nodded approvingly. The humans had clearly overstepped their bounds. They would learn their lesson soon enough, but on Earth, Senator Patricia Webb was reading the same statement to her emergency council. The room was full of the most important people in human government. Military leaders, scientists, trade representatives, and colonial governors all sat around the table. So, Webb said, putting down the tablet with Disha's statement, they think we're children having a tantrum. Admiral Chen Wu spoke up from his seat. Ma'am, I've been getting reports from our people in joint operations. The aliens are already acting like we never existed. They're reassigning our ships to other duties without even asking us. What about our people on the research stations? Asked Dr. Kevin Murphy, who was the head of Human Scientific Cooperation with the Council. I have 43 researchers on 12 different projects. Some of those projects are years away from completion. Webb looked around the table. How quickly can we get all our people back? Military personnel can be recalled immediately, Admiral Chen Wu said. But the civilians might take longer. Some of them are in the middle of important work. Them, Webb said firmly. Every human citizen working on council projects comes home now. We're done pretending that we need their approval to exist. Dr. Murphy looked worried. Senator, some of these projects are crucial research. If we pull out now, years of work could be lost. Then we'll continue the work ourselves, Webb replied. In our own labs, with our own funding, for our own benefit. Meeting lasted for 6 hours. At the end, Operation Exodus was approved and underway. Every human in council space would be withdrawn within 30 days. No exceptions. Admiral Chen Wu took personal command of the operation. He had been working with alien military forces for over a decade. He knew their strengths and weaknesses. He also knew that humans did a lot more work than anyone. Realized the first sign of trouble came at Station Kepler 9. It was a joint research facility studying dark matter. Dr. Murphy and his team of 12 researchers had been running most of the complex calculations needed to keep the experiments running. When they left, the alien scientists tried to continue the work. Within 6 hours, the main reactor started showing dangerous fluctuations. The nautiloid scientists tried to fix it, but they did not understand the human modifications to the system. The Zephyrian engineers could not read the human technical notes. The station had to be evacuated. Similar problems started happening everywhere humans had been working. The early warning system that watched for pirate attacks in the Outer Rim began failing. Human technicians had been maintaining the sensor networks, and without them, the system started breaking down piece by piece. Captain Tony Martinez was one of the first human merchants to receive new orders. He was carrying medical supplies to a nautiloid colony when the message came through. Return to human space immediately. Do not accept any new contracts with council species. The nautiloids were desperate. Our colony was fighting a plague, and the medical supplies on Tony's ship were the only treatment available. They offered to pay triple the normal rate. Tony felt bad for them, but his orders were clear. "I'm sorry," he told the colony administrator. "Find another carrier." "There are no other carriers scheduled for 3 weeks," the administrator replied. "People will die." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before your government decided humans weren't worth treating with respect," Coney said. His ship turned around and headed back to human space. Word of the incident spread quickly. Other human merchants received similar requests and gave the same answer. The alien species had spent decades relying on human shipping networks without realizing it. Now those networks were gone. General Vexter was still confident when the first reports reached him. So what if a few research projects had problems? The Vorthan military was strong enough to handle any security issues. Key, they did not need human help. His confidence lasted until the first major pirate attack hit a Vorthan convoy. The pirates had been tracking council shipping for months, using information from the failed sensor networks. They knew exactly when and where the convoy would be most vulnerable. The attack should have been easy to stop. The Vorthan ships were bigger and better armed than the pirate vessels, but the logistics went wrong from the start. The supply ships were late because human freight carriers were no longer available. The communication system failed because human technicians were not there to maintain it. The battle plan fell apart because the human analysts who usually provided intelligence support were gone. The pirates escaped with half the convoy's cargo. It was the first successful attack on Vorthan shipping in over 50 years. General Vexter stared at the battle report in disbelief. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We have the best military in the galaxy." His aide, a younger officer who had worked closely with humans, spoke carefully. "Sir, the humans handled a lot of support operations, more than we realized." "Nonsense," Vextar snapped. "They were just doing simple tasks. Anyone can do logistics and maintenance." But as the days passed, more problems appeared. Communication delays because human relay stations were abandoned. Supply shortages because human trade routes were no longer available. Equipment failures because human maintenance crews were gone. Hi. Counselor Thesh began receiving reports from across council space. The Zephyrians were having environmental problems on their colony worlds. The Nautiloids were struggling with infrastructure failures. Even the proud Vorthans were experiencing military setbacks. All of the problems seemed to trace back to the same source: the absence of human expertise and support. "This is temporary," Thesh told himself. "They will adapt. They will find other solutions." But deep down, he was starting to worry. The humans had been gone for only 2 weeks, and already the galaxy seemed to be falling apart. How much worse would it get? In human space, things were very different. The returned scientists and engineers were working on new projects. The military was developing new strategies. The merchants were exploring new trade routes with species that had never joined the council. Senator Webb received daily reports about the chaos in council space. Each report made her more certain that humanity had made the right choice. "Let them figure out how to run their galaxy without us," she said. "We have our own future to build." 6 months had passed since the humans walked out of the peace talks. The problems that started small were now growing bigger every day. What had seemed like minor inconveniences were becoming major disasters. The Helix Nebula Research Facility was supposed to be the pride of the Galactic Council. Scientists from 8 different species worked there, trying to solve the mysteries of faster-than-light communication. The project had been going on for 12 years, and they were close to a breakthrough. Dr. Velth, the head Zephyrian scientist, stared at the equations on his screen. They made no sense to him anymore. For the past 6 months, he and his team had been trying to continue the work that Dr. Susan Park and her human colleagues had been doing. But every time they thought they understood something, new problems appeared. "The mathematical models are failing again," his assistant reported. "The quantum field calculations are unstable. Dr. Velth wanted to scream. The humans had made these calculations look easy, okay? They would work for a few hours and solve problems that had been bothering other species for months. Now, without them, the entire project was falling apart. Send another message to the Human Research Council, he ordered. Offer them whatever they want, double pay, triple pay, their own research labs. Just get them back. A response came back, the same as always. The humans thanked them for the offer, but explained they were busy with their own projects now. They were not available for council work. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim, pirate attacks were happening almost every day. The early warning system that had protected trade routes for decades was breaking down piece by piece. Captain Rex, a Nautiloid security officer, watched his screens with growing frustration. Sensor Grid 7 is offline again, his communications officer reported. That's the third one this week. Captain Rex knew what the problem was. Human technicians had installed and maintained most of the sensor networks. They had done such good work that everyone forgot how complex the systems really were. That the humans were gone. No one else could keep them running properly. Can we fix it ourselves? Okay, he asked his engineering team. The chief engineer, a crystalline being whose species was known for technical skill, shook his head. Okay, the human modifications are too complex. We don't understand how they integrated the different systems. A merchant ship sent out a distress call just as they were talking. Pirates had attacked another convoy, and there was no early warning because the sensors were down. By the time security ships arrived, the pirates were long gone with their stolen cargo. Captain Rex filed his report with growing anger. This was the 15th successful pirate attack in his sector this month. Before the humans left, there might be one attack every 6 months. And it usually failed because the security forces were ready for it. The Nautiloid homeworld was facing an even bigger crisis. Their main terraforming project on New Coral was failing catastrophically. The planet had been slowly transformed over 50 years from a dead rock into a world that could support Nautiloid life. Millions of his people were supposed to move there within the next decade. Environmental engineer Todd Walker stood in the control center, watching disaster unfold on his screens. The atmosphere was becoming toxic, The artificial oceans were turning acidic. The carefully balanced ecosystem was collapsing. How did this happen? Demanded Governor Deepcurrent, who had flown in from the homeworld to see the crisis personally. The atmospheric processes are failing, Todd Walker explained. The human specialists who designed the backup systems are gone. We're trying to maintain the planet's environment with equipment we don't fully understand. Can't we just build new processors? It would take 20 years to design them from scratch. The humans developed their systems over decades of research. They understood atmospheric chemistry in ways that we never needed to learn. Governor Deepcurrent looked at the reports showing poisoned air and dying seas. 50 years of work was being destroyed in months. Contact the human government directly. Tell them we need help. Tell them we'll pay anything they ask. The human response was polite but firm. Appreciated the Nautiloid situation, but they were currently focused on their own terraforming projects. He suggested the Nautiloids contact other council species for assistance, but other council species were having their own problems. The Vorthines were dealing with military disasters. The Zephyrians were struggling with infrastructure failures. Everyone was too busy with their own crises to help anyone else. Captain Tony Martinez was having the best year of his career. As a human merchant, he was now free to trade with species that had never been part of the Galactic Council. These species were eager to do business with humans and treated them as equals rather than junior partners. He had just finished delivering mining equipment to the herons, bird-like species that lived in the unexplored regions beyond council space. The herons paid well and were grateful for human technology and expertise. Your people are very different from the council species, The Heron trade leader had told him, "You treat us with respect. You don't act like you're better than us." Tony smiled at the memory. In the past 6 months, he had made contact with for new species. All of them were interested in working with humans. None of them cared that humans were young or primitive by council standards. His ship's communication system beeped with an incoming message. It was from a Saphirian trade official, asking if he would consider carrying emergency medical supplies to one of their colony worlds. They were offering 5 times the normal shipping rate. Tony looked at the message and deleted it without responding. He had tried to help the Saphirians once, right after the walkout. They had treated him like a servant and complained about his prices. Now, they needed him, but he had better things to do. Back on Earth, Senator Patricia Webb was reading the daily intelligence reports with satisfaction. Every day brought new stories of council failures and growing chaos in their space. Meanwhile, human colonies were thriving, human research was advancing, and human trade was expanding into new regions. Of the Galaxy. President Dan Foster had been elected 3 months ago on a platform of human independence and strength. His administration was taking a harder line with anyone who wanted human help. The days of humans doing favors for species that looked down on them were over. The Nautiloids are asking for environmental assistance again, Webb told him during their daily briefing. The terraforming project is completely failing now. What's our response? Foster asked. It's the same as always. We're happy to help any species that treats us as equals. But we're not running emergency rescue missions for people who called us barely evolved primates. Foster nodded approvingly. Good. What about our own projects? Excellent progress. The new Terra colony is ahead of schedule. Our atmospheric processors are working perfectly. Dr. Park's research team has made breakthrough discoveries in atmospheric chemistry that go far beyond anything the Council ever achieved. The irony was not lost on either of them. While Council terraforming projects failed catastrophically, human colonies were succeeding beyond all expectations. The same species that had been dismissed as too primitive to handle important territory was now proving more capable than their supposed superiors. Hi, Counselor. Tesh floated in his chambers, reading crisis reports from across Council space. Research projects failing, trade routes disrupted, military operations falling apart, environmental disasters spreading. Every problem seemed to trace back to the same source: the absence of human expertise and support. He had sent dozens of diplomatic messages to the human government. All had been politely rejected. The humans were not interested in returning to Council space under the old arrangements. They were building their own future now, for the first time in his long life. Sish began to wonder if the Council had made a terrible mistake. The humans were supposed to come crawling back by now, desperate for Council protection and guidance. Instead, they seemed to be doing better than ever, while Council space fell into chaos. Ambassador Zekthar still insisted that the problems were temporary. The primitives will realize they need us, he kept saying. They cannot survive alone. But Thesh was beginning to think that maybe the primitives were not so primitive after all. Maybe the Galactic Council was the one that could not survive alone. 1 year after the humans walked out, the Galactic Council was facing the worst crisis in its 1,000-year history. What had started as small problems was now threatening the entire structure of galactic civilization. General Vexstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his military reputation crumble. The Vorthan Outer Territories were in full rebellion, and his forces were losing battles they should have won easily. The latest defeat still burned in his mind. His fleet had been bigger than the rebel forces. His ships had better weapons and stronger shields. On paper, the battle should have been a simple victory. But everything had gone wrong from the first minute. The supply ships arrived 3 days late because the logistics network had collapsed without human freight carriers. A communication system failed during the battle because the relay stations needed maintenance that only human technicians knew how to do. Worst of all, the battle plans were useless because the human intelligence analysts who usually provided detailed enemy information were no longer available. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the rebels have taken the Kepler-7 system. Our forces are retreating to the inner defensive line." Vexstar wanted to roar with frustration, but that would not help his situation. In 1 year, he had lost more territory than the Vorthan Empire had lost in the previous century. His enemies were calling him the worst general in Vorthan history. "Contact the human military command," he ordered. "Offer them mercenary contracts. We'll pay whatever they ask." The response came back within hours. The humans thanked the Vorthans for their interest, but explained that they were not available for mercenary work. They suggested the Vorthans try hiring from other council species. The suggestion was almost insulting. Other council species were having their own military problems. Everyone knew that human tactical support had been crucial to most successful council operations. Without it, even the mighty Vorthan military was struggling against rebels and pirates. Meanwhile, on Zeph Prime, the Zephyrian homeworld was facing environmental catastrophe. The atmospheric processors that had maintained their carefully controlled environment for centuries were failing one by one. Emergency Administrator Crystal Song stood in the crisis center, watching her world slowly become uninhabitable. "Processor Station 12 has gone offline," her assistant reported. "That leaves only 6 stations still functioning. We need at least 10 to maintain safe atmospheric conditions." Crystal Song looked at the charts showing air quality across their world. Large areas were already dangerous for Zephyrian life. They lost 2 more processors. Millions of her people would need to be evacuated. "What about the repair teams?" she asked. "They're trying, but they don't understand the human modifications to the systems. Every time they try to fix something, they cause new problems." The Zephyrians had always been proud of their technical abilities. They were known throughout the galaxy as skilled engineers and scientists, but the human engineers had worked on their atmospheric systems for decades, making improvements and modifications that no one else understood. "Send another message to the Human Engineering Guild," Crystal Song ordered. "Tell them we're facing extinction. Surely they won't let an entire species die for the sake of politics." The human response was the same as always. They were sorry to hear about the Zephyrian crisis, but they were currently focused on their own atmospheric research projects. They suggested consulting with other council technical experts, but there were no other experts who understood the systems well enough to fix them. The humans had been the only ones with the knowledge and skill needed to maintain the complex atmospheric processors. President Dan Foster sat in his office on Earth, reading the latest intelligence reports from Council Space. Every week brought new stories of disasters and failures. The mighty Galactic Council was falling apart, and everyone knew why. "Loy, terraforming project has completely collapsed," his advisor informed him. "New Coral is now uninhabitable. They're evacuating the entire colony." Foster nodded without surprise. He had predicted this outcome months ago. The Nautiloids had relied on human atmospheric specialists for 50 years. When those specialists left, the complex ecosystem they had created began to fail. "What about our own terraforming projects?" he asked. "I had a schedule on all fronts. New Terra will be ready for full colonization next year. New Mars is exceeding all expectations for agricultural output. The atmospheric engineering team, led by Dr. Park, has developed techniques that are far superior to anything the Council ever achieved." Foster smiled. While Council worlds were becoming uninhabitable, human colonies were thriving. The species that had been dismissed as too primitive to handle important territory was now the most successful at creating new worlds. His communication system chimed with an incoming message. It was from High Counselor Thesh himself, requesting a private meeting to discuss mutual cooperation opportunities. Foster read the message and deleted it without responding. Captain Lisa Brown was having the adventure of her lifetime. As an explorer for the Human Independent Fleet, she had made first contact with 7 new species in the past year. All of them had been eager to meet humans and learn about their technology and culture. Her current mission had brought her to the Andromeda Gateway, where she was meeting with the Harmony Collective. They were a group of machine intelligences that had never been contacted by the Council. "Your people are fascinating," the collective's spokesperson told her through its mechanical translator. "You approach us as equals, seeking mutual benefit. This is very different from what we expected, based on our observations of other organic species." Lisa smiled. "Humans believe in treating others with respect, regardless of their physical form or origins. We're interested in what you can teach us, and we hope we can share knowledge that helps you as well." The meeting was going better than she had hoped. The Harmony Collective had advanced technologies that could revolutionize human industry. In return, they were interested in human approaches to creativity and problem solving. "We would like to establish formal diplomatic relations with your independent alliance," the collective announced. "Your species shows wisdom that we find refreshing." Back in council space, more species were beginning to question their leadership's decisions. The Aquatic Federation had lost 2 major colonies, 2 infrastructure failures. The crystal communes were struggling with communication breakdowns across their territory. Even the proud Stellar Dominion was facing serious problems with their deep space exploration programs. Councilor Yeath of the Zephyrians stood before the council assembly, preparing to say words that had never been spoken in this chamber before. "Fellow councilors," she began, "we must face the truth. Our decision to reject human diplomatic equality has been a disaster. Our infrastructure is failing, our military operations are ineffective, and our research programs have stalled. Meanwhile, humanity is thriving independently and forming new alliances with species we have never even contacted." Ambassador Sekthar hissed his displeasure. "You suggest we crawl to the primitives and beg for their help." "The Vorthan Empire does not beg. The Vorthan Empire is losing a civil war," Yeath replied coldly. "Your primitives are now more technologically advanced than we are. They have better ships, more successful colonies, and stronger alliances than any council species." The assembly erupted in angry debates. Some species supported Yeath's call for renewed diplomacy with humanity. Others, led by the Vorthans, insisted that the council should maintain its pride and find other solutions. But in their private chambers, every council leader was reading the same intelligence reports. Humanity was no longer the desperate young species that had walked out of peace talks a year ago. They had become a major galactic power with their own agenda and their own allies. The question was no longer whether humans needed the council. The question was whether the council could survive without the humans. 2 years after the humans walked out of peace talks, the Galactic Council was dying. 3 member species had already announced they were leaving to seek independent agreements with humanity's independent alliance. More were preparing to follow. Councilor Thesh floated alone in the vast council chamber that had once been filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. Now only half the seats were occupied, and those who remained looked desperate and defeated. The breaking point had come when the Nautiloid Federation formally withdrew from the council. Their ambassador had stood in this very chamber and delivered a speech that still echoed in Thesha's mind. "For 50 years, we relied on human expertise to build our colonies and maintain our worlds. When they offered to help us, we accepted gratefully. When they asked for fair treatment in return, we refused. Now our worlds are dying, our colonies are abandoned, and our people are suffering. We will not make the same mistake twice." The Nautiloids had been the first to break, but they were not the last. The crystal communes followed within days, announcing their intention to join humanity's independent alliance. Their reason was simple. Human technology was now superior to anything the council could offer. Tesh received a communication request that made his blue light flicker with nervous energy. President Dan Foster of Earth was asking for a private meeting after 2 years of silence. The human leader was finally willing to talk, but Tesh knew this would not be the conversation he had imagined 2 years ago. The humans were not coming back to beg for council membership. They were coming to dictate terms to a failing galactic government. President Foster appeared on the holographic display, sitting calmly in his office on Earth. Behind him, through the window, Tesh could see the gleaming towers of New Geneva, humanity's diplomatic capital. The city looked prosperous and confident, very different from the struggling colonies of council space. "Hi, Counselor," Foster said politely. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." "President Foster," Tesh replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I hope we can find a way to resolve our past misunderstandings." Foster smiled, but it was not a warm expression. "It's understandings. Is that what you call it when your people refer to humans as barely evolved primates who should be grateful for scraps?" Thesha's light dimmed. He had hoped the humans might have forgotten Ambassador Sektar's exact words. Apparently, they had not. "Perhaps some of our representatives spoke more harshly than necessary," Tesh said carefully. "But surely we can move past old grievances for the good of galactic stability." "Galactic stability," Foster repeated. "You mean the stability of your failing government?" "Let me share some recent news with you, Counselor. Yesterday, the Harmony Collective joined our independent alliance. They bring advanced manufacturing technology that will revolutionize our industrial capacity. Next week, we're signing a mutual defense pact with the Stellar Nomads, giving us access to their exploration fleets and star charts of unexplored regions." Tesh felt something like panic rising in his consciousness. The Harmony Collective had been completely unknown to the Council. Until recently, the Stellar Nomads controlled some of the most valuable trade routes in the galaxy. Humanity was not just surviving without the Council. They were building something bigger and stronger. "What do you want?" Tesh asked, abandoning diplomatic pretense. "Nothing," Foster replied simply. 2 years ago, we wanted fair treatment and equal partnership. You made it clear that was impossible, so we built our own partnerships with species that value cooperation over domination. On the planet Vorth Prime, Ambassador Sektar was learning the same lesson in a much more personal way. His empire was collapsing around him, torn apart by rebellions and military defeats. The rebels had gained access to advanced human weapons technology through black market dealers who had no love for the Vorthan Empire. His military advisors had suggested one last desperate option: surrender to the humans and beg for help in exchange for anything they wanted. The idea made Sektar's scales burn with humiliation, but he was running out of choices. He sent a message to the human government, swallowing his pride and asking for military assistance. The response came back within hours, signed by Captain Jake Morrison, the same human diplomat who had walked out of the peace talks. 2 years ago, the message was polite but devastating. The Independent Alliance does not interfere in the internal affairs of sovereign governments. We suggest you resolve your domestic issues through diplomatic means. This was the same kind of dismissive non-help that the Council had given to struggling species for centuries. The humans were not being cruel. They were simply treating the Vorthans exactly the way the Vorthans had treated others back in the Council chamber. More bad news arrived every hour. Zephyrian homeworld had been evacuated as their atmospheric processors finally failed completely. The Aquatic Federation was dissolving as their member worlds joined other alliances. Even species that remained loyal to the Council were demanding massive reforms. Counselor Yeth, one of the few voices of reason left in the chamber, stood to address the remaining representatives. "We have a choice," she said quietly. "We can continue pretending that we are still the supreme power in this galaxy, or we can accept reality Humanity is now the strongest single power in known space. Their independent alliance controls more territory and resources than we do. Most importantly, they have what we lost, the respect and cooperation of their member species. Ambassador Zekdar, attending the session by hologram since his homeworld was under siege, hissed his displeasure. You suggest we surrender to the primitives. I suggest we acknowledge that they were never primitives, Yith replied. We were simply too arrogant to see their true capabilities. She gestured to the empty seats around them. Look at this chamber. Half our members are gone. Our infrastructure is failing. Our military operations are ineffective. Our research programs have stalled. Meanwhile, humanity builds new colonies faster than we can count them, develops technologies we cannot match, and forms alliances we cannot break. Thesh knew she was right, but admitting it felt like admitting the failure of everything he had believed in for 1,000 years. President Foster's final words to him had been simple and clear. Any species that wants to join the independent alliance as an equal partner will be welcomed. But the days of galactic hierarchies and superior races are over. We judge our partners by their actions, not their age or their past achievements. 3 more council species announced their departure that day. By the end of the week, the Galactic Council would cease to exist as a meaningful government. High Counselor Thesh floated alone in the empty chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 years of galactic domination. The humans had done exactly what they promised. They had built something better. In the end, the species that had been dismissed as barely evolved primates had evolved beyond the need for anyone's approval. They had learned the most important lesson in galactic politics. True strength comes not from demanding respect, but from earning it. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of the Independent Alliance had begun. And somewhere in human space, Captain Jake Morrison was probably smiling.